Thank you, sir. So welcome to this week's TOC, where we've got a few bits on the agenda. We've got reviewing the actions from last week, which should be nice and quick. Review of outstanding PRs, then something on orphaned repos in relation to Chris's action from last week, an update from the Paketo working group, and any other business. Has anyone got anything to add at this point? No. Okay. So in terms of reviewing actions from last week, Eric, I did say that you'd sent an email out, and I see you've already had a reply.
Yep. Thanks, Norm, for commenting on the community issue that we started about finding Stratos maintainers. So please keep us posted on whatever effort you can.
Is there a deadline date you're looking at? Like you need word by such and such date?
I think maybe let's still keep that April 5th date in mind to discuss. We'll see who else comes out from the community as a potentially interested maintainer. That seems like maybe a good point to revisit support for the project.
Okay, cool. Chris, you did send around your spreadsheet, because that's one of the things that we're going to be discussing shortly.
Yeah, so I ran a script or so to just find all of the remaining repositories that are in the Cloud Foundry GitHub org that are public but not archived and have not been assigned to a working group. And there is a lot of them, as you might imagine, because it's a huge GitHub org. So I think there's 130 or so of these. Some are belong to the CFF. Okay, I deal with those. A couple Stratos, just talked about that. And then the others, many can be archived probably, but basically I did a quick pass, and it looks like Eric and some other folks have done another pass to kind of assign these to the various working groups. And so I'll reach out, in the next week and ping the working group leads and have them take a look at this, and then just determine either if it's miscategorized or if it should be archived or if it should be formally added to the working group and added to the charter. And then hopefully we'll have every asset in all of Cloud Foundry assigned to a working group.
Cool. And I did contact the Paketo working group, hence why Daniel's here. So that's all good. Okay. Eric, do you fancy just jumping in and doing the review outstanding PRs whilst I turn what Chris has just said into some notes?
Oh yeah, sure. I can start going through the list.
Thank you, sir.
Let's see. Yeah, so I guess there's quite a few of them. I'll start dropping links into the chat as well for convenience. All right. First one up is 225. Chris, I believe this is yours, adding a contributing doc and a couple other updates.
Yeah, David mentioned that we could probably use a formal contributing doc on this that other than repos could pull in as needed. So I drafted that up. And then what else did I do? Oh, I added the services the vulnerability management working group to the just the markdown list there because it was missing, and I then just removed one small other thing. So if someone wants to review that, and presumably merge it in, I don't think it's terribly, yeah, I don't think it's too tricky. Although if there's something I'm missing in the contributing doc, and someone wants to just take a quick look, that'd be great.
Great. I'm just going to tag all the TOC folks for review. All right, we will take a look at that in the coming week. The only thing I could think of for contributing is we might want to point people directly to the RFC process documents, because we have that kind of sub process within the community repo for those contributions. All right, any other questions about that? If not, I'll move on to the next one. That's 220. Let's see, this is adding metric store release to the app runtime platform working group. Okay, so Amelia started this, and she thinks it's related to the logging in metric area, which seems plausible. So I suppose as long as that set of folks in that technical area is on board with that, sounds pretty reasonable. I guess we as the TOC should also take a look. But
there's only one downside. Since I approved them a week ago, we now have some conflicts to be resolved.
yeah. Well, that's fine. I mean, we can either patch those up or ask the contributors. I think there's even some outstanding PRs that might not even be on this list that are also in that state.
It's with the YAML format, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Reformatting the bulk of those working group documents to have some embedded YAML. All right, well, we can take a look at that, make sure we patch it up offline, but it doesn't sound controversial. Next one up is 218. This is removing the mention of Stratos from the app runtime interfaces charter. I think this is largely a cosmetic thing because we had already taken it out of the other set of assets. I guess we might hold on this while we're still determining the fate of the Stratos project.
Has there been a lot of engagement on that thread in the community on the Stratos fate, Eric?
The only thing Norm mentioned, he's going to discuss with some other folks at Stark and Wayne whether they could take on maintenance of it. Norm, I think that was on the community issue that I started. But
that's what you were talking about earlier. Sorry.
Yeah,
I'm caught up now.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right. Next item is 173, RFC for project roadmap and visibility. I think that we had mentioned this last time. Oh, looks like we have complete approval on this one.
Yes, we do have complete approval on this one, so we could go ahead and test out the script on it.
Yeah. Sounds good. Maybe not doing that here. We should do that offline.
Yeah. But yeah, if someone fancies giving that a go.
Great. All right. Speaking of RFCs, next one we have is 171, which is also reformatted to be in the RFC format. And I think we have enough approvals from everyone to also accept this.
Yep. You don't have to wait for mine. I'm generally in favor of this. I haven't looked through the details. I was on vacation for a week. Snooze, you lose.
All right, so that's a good candidate to also merge in with the script. And I think maybe the last of those is 170. This is another fairly short one about GitHub Teams and Access, which is now in the RFC format.
Greg mentioned an issue with the existing teams. So if the automation kicks in one day, I guess we have a manual cleanup of the teams created manually by the workgroup leads just to continue working. That's probably unavoidable. I don't know.
Yeah, that seems like a logistical issue that we could just work out as a one-time thing with Cappy folks. And I think I had requested some changes, but then I just went ahead and committed them because they were cosmetic. So I'm due with a reapproval on that. Just making sure all the TOC folks are pinged as approver, as reviewers on this to approve. Okay, and then the last one we have is 172, which is about proposal for a stale bot. I think there was maybe still some more outstanding debate on this. Oh, and I see Ruben just reformatted it to be in the RFC format. Thank you, Ruben. Okay, well, it seems like this is due for broader review.
Yeah, yes, I'm on mute. I would suggest opening this one up for the final comment period.
Yeah, sounds good. I guess we've got everyone but Jan and we've got Ruben here. So is there general approval that we should open this for the week-long final comment period?
Yep.
Do I have to give verbal confirmation?
Thumbs up is fine. Recording.
Please work. Okay, so open it for final comment whenever you're ready, Ruben. Okay.
We'll look into how to do that.
Conveniently, it's in the RFC doc.
I assumed as much.
Okay, and we've managed to cover off orphaned repos already. Thanks to for your update on that, Chris. And from that, I've created an action for the TOC to continue adding suggestions in that sheet as well. So at this point, it's over to Daniel and Brian for the Paketo update.
Hey everyone. First time doing this, so bear with us. I think we were kind of given some questions to kind of go through, so we can just kind of step through those, and if you have any feedback for us, let us know. The first one that was posed is what is on the roadmap for Paketo? And right now, the roadmap is on the roadmap. We're actually going through our roadmap discussions and trying to work out a roadmap for 2022. We've got a GitHub thread that's going, or GitHub discussion that's going, and we've been getting pretty good engagement, definitely better than last year in terms of feedback from people and things that they want to see. Ryan, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, in addition to like future plans for the roadmap, I can talk about stuff that's currently being worked on that's like roadmap items. So for us, we've got things like the addition of poetry for the Python build pack. We're putting SBOM literally everywhere. So expect to see a lot more SBOM output for different languages. The next one up, I think we're going to be looking at into deeply is .NET Core. So good SBOM support in that ecosystem. We're working on a web server build pack The concept here is to provide better support for like React, Angular, Jamstack style applications. This is anything that's just like statically serve JavaScript, but that needs to be compiled in some sort of way. So React or Angular, those kinds of things. It'll be mostly a stand-in for the existing kind of static file concept build pack that exists in Cloud Foundry, but just with better, more native support. And then the last major thing we've been working on recently is a complete bottom-up rewrite of our PHP build pack. That has just been slowly accreting technical debt and was due for us to kind of break it apart and make it a little bit easier to manage going forward. Hopefully, we'll introduce some awesome new functionality and stuff like that as we're going.
Cool. So that yeah, that kind of wraps up the roadmap question. Any feedback or questions on that one?
I think the SBOM support is a fantastic area to work on. I'm really glad that you're bringing it to more languages and frameworks. I've been doing a few SBOM demos to folks. I've had to rely on the Java stuff to showcase the capability. And then obviously, the other languages sort of tail off, but it's very, very encouraging to know that, it's a lot more is happening in that area. Also, I wanted to circle back to the static file build pack equivalent, I guess. Could you throw in a few details? And the reason I ask this is because there's like a bunch of these Jamstack static website users who could really benefit from some of the stuff that we're doing. And so having that brings like a big slice of the hipster community interested in this stuff. So I'm really curious to know what that is about. If you could share some links or send something my way, that'd be great as well.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. Just to kind of briefly explain the concept, like the web servers build pack is basically going to cover anything that you would deploy and serve using like Nginx or Apache HTTPD. So it's mostly just like static file content. For the most part, that's going to be JavaScript files because you're probably serving it to a browser. But how you get from what developers actually work on day to day to that static JavaScript asset, that whole pipeline is what we're building. So we're making it so that in the actual build container that the build pack is executing, you're going to like install Node, install all of your like Node module dependencies, run some sort of build process, whether that's like a Angular build or a React build or Vue or Next.js or any of the like 75 million of these kinds of frameworks that exist. And the output on the other side is basically a bunch of static assets, CSS and JavaScript and that kind of stuff, minified, bundled, so on and so forth. Then from there, the container basically just says, drop those things into this layer over here, drop the actual web server into this layer over here, generate an Nginx conf or whatever in order to actually serve those things in a really convenient way. And then you've got your container image. So on the, the other side, you're not going to have Node, you're not going to have any of these package modules, you're not going to have anything that you didn't need other than the static files that you're actually trying to serve, the web server you're trying to serve, and its configuration. So you just end up on the other side with a really slim, hopefully secure image that's kind of purpose built for that particular use case. It's not just like stuff that's in the JavaScript ecosystem. There's lots of other things like Hugo and Jekyll and a bunch of other things that exist in other language family ecosystems that are used for stuff like documentation or really simple static websites. We plan to support those types of things in the future as well.
Awesome, thanks.
But I can include some links to some of the RFCs that outline the plans here.
Please.
Great. Any other questions or feedback?
I have one question. Do you have a roadmap or a story at least how the Paketo build packs can be used in CF on Bosch?
I was going to ask the same question.
I think that is really a question that I have as well. I'm interested to see how we can move towards that, but I'm not really sure that I don't think we have anything that's planned at the moment to do that. But it's definitely something I'd like to discuss more.
So like historically, the connecting pieces here can be done in like a number of different ways. One of the mechanisms we explored in the past was to take Paketo build packs and to push them inside of the V2B specification so that the actual platform itself, Cloud Foundry, doesn't need to change at all, but the build packs themselves, what they actually do, their contents, all of that changes in order to like give you the new functionality. That obviously has a bunch of limitations, but it was something that was explored. And so we kind of know what that path forward could look like. The alternative is to build natively the CNB specification into Cloud Foundry. So to like leverage parts from the CNB team's like work to bring that to Cloud Foundry directly. I don't know of any plans to do that. And I don't know that Paketo necessarily is terribly well positioned to do that, since we don't ourselves directly work on the CNB specification other than like contribute it as like a participant in the community. And then also we're not terribly involved in like the upstream of Cloud Foundry of like where it would integrate, say with like Diego or Cappy or any of the components that would need to know anything about that in order to actually execute the build pack life cycles specifically. I think we could definitely serve as kind of like a connector to like make sure that all the people who do need to get involved, who work actively in those spaces, can communicate with each other and become involved, but we're probably not the right place for that work to be actually happening.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense.
Yep. Thanks.
I think everyone's potentially, I would be curious to further explore in partnership with you all what it would actually look like to do the CNBs in Cloud Foundry. I think there's like a bunch of user experience questions there where like people aren't used to using the multi-build pack support that is in Cloud Foundry, but it is there. Do we need a registry or not? Can we get away without a registry? I have a few questions that like would be fun to explore, where I think we need people that know Diego reasonably well, like somebody like, you know, Amin or Amelia and Greg maybe, and one of you all and I go off and sort of write up what it would take to do it. I don't think we have commitment to do it for sure, but it would be really interesting. I think what turns me off on it, what I used to think this was the best idea in the whole world, and we obviously had to do it immediately. And what makes me nervous is that it's different. The support that you offer is really different. And the way that you do service bindings is really different. And the way, like, a lot of stuff is different. So like, you don't just switch over and have a good time necessarily. If you had a good time before, you have a some percent chance of having a successful build after the switch. And I'm really curious what that percent is. I don't think we have enough data to measure it from anybody actually doing it. But what we can do, like analysis and determine several circumstances, right? Static analysis to determine when it won't work. Of which there are several. I've tried this several times because I'm running both at the same time, and oh man, it like doesn't, like my Gradle doesn't build or whatever. It's like, no, your Gradle build pack is like slightly off, and therefore like whatever. I don't know. I basically tried to build some sample projects, both successfully and unsuccessfully, that used to work inside of Cloud Foundry, because the support's changed for better or worse, right?
Yeah, there's definitely some subtle differences there that we've run into. Like, I know there's been some interesting bits around like running as PID1 and not running as PID1, which I don't think is an issue on Cloud Foundry, but for Paketo build packs, it does default to running as PID1. And so, yeah, there's definitely some nuance to it. But
yeah,
I would love to be involved and talk about it more and explore that though.
On the other hand, you have now to maintain two, let's say, streams of build packs, and yeah, it will continue like this, right?
Yeah. I mean, the kind of golden end state is to have one set of build packs that we maintain. It's probably a really long time before that would happen, even if we got this type of integration in, just because of the differences, the nuance there, and migrating people across, between them. But yeah, someday we can dream.
Yeah, I mean, it's occurred to me that I think it'd be fair to characterize the Paketo build packs, from a consumer perspective as maybe the next major version of the build pack lines targeting those languages, because when you look at the interface from the code base or the environmental specification that goes into them to configure them, then there are breaking changes there. And so, from that perspective, even if we do get them working, incorporated into CF on VMs, that now just really looks like, what does a transition to the next major version of that build pack line look like? And how can we make that transition easy, or how do we decide when there's enough of the transition that's covered for existing applications to say we're going to close out the old support for the old previous version, because it's not worth maintaining it anymore. And I'm optimistic that we have the flexibility for build pack selection within the current CF mechanisms to make that an incremental and smooth transition. But it'd be great to be able to start it for sure.
I mean, maybe, but like the whole detect mechanism in Cloud Foundry is you only detect the first build pack that quote unquote works. And so like which if you're running both major versions at once, like which one are you gonna put first, Eric, as a platform operator with 1,000 apps? You're gonna put the new one first and then teach people how to switch back to the old one? You put the old one first, no one's gonna use the new one. Like you can't win unless maybe there's some sort of like fallback detection mechanism. You try the new one and then it falls back and it builds additional. So does CMB have anything about this? Because there are multiple detects and multiple trials for detection with failed builds, or is still just the first one is the one that it goes with?
Yeah, so the detection phase is distinct from the build phase. So you would basically pass through all the build packs, searching for the first one that passes detection, just like the Cloud Foundry build packs, and then the build executes. And if that fails, it just stops to say, here's your build failure. This is actually even harder because that just covers the most basic type of failure, which is it actually fails during build. A worse scenario is it builds correctly, but doesn't run. And so that's an even harder problem to solve.
Yep. Yep. Breaking changes in build packs are hard to consume as a result, right? I think you'd have to offer some both for some period of time and try to figure it out.
Yeah,
Can I ask you all another question when we're done with talking about this particular topic?
Yeah, all I want to say is it would be good if we could start at least to sketch out a way how this could work. I mean, I know a little bit from Capi. We have V2, V3 now, I don't know, since 2 years, both versions there, and it's far away from even announcing that a removal will happen sooner or later. That takes another 3 or 4 years. So the alternative is just to say it is as it is, and we will never see the Paketo build packs. But having no statement at all is, I would say, not polite from the community. There should be at least a roadmap, and if the roadmap is 5 years, it is 5 years. Yes, it takes what it takes, and a migration definitely is something that is a slow step.
I think the biggest concern is the CMB specification is still, to this date, relatively fast moving. And so any attempt to actually integrate it to make Cloud Foundry a target platform for the spec would mean that you'd have to have a dedicated team like interested in continuing to make sure that it would continue to function and pull in new specification changes and so on and so forth. That's a difference than what we have today, where like the V2B specification for build packs has been stable for years. And so that code is not needed to be changed.
Yeah, like the life cycle is not hit on 1.0 yet or anything like that. So it's there can be, it's just strictly from a build pack author side, there can be breaking, things and new support added, between releases.
That's a very valid point. Yeah.
Do we know how far away we may be from a 1.0? Or is that nobody knows?
I had thought that they were pretty close about a year ago, but then they kind of went down this path. There's an interesting problem in the build pack space about how do we enable certain functionality where you need to install like very low level like OS infrastructure bits. This is stuff that like in the past, there have been things that are like relatively unsupported build packs, like the apt build pack that, are just like, this is an emergency hatch. If you need to do this, you're kind of like, futzing with the internal details of what's happening on inside the container image here. And we're not gonna like say that this is the best idea. But the CNB spec wanted to really address that from like a first class perspective of how can we support that particular type of modification to the container image. And it kind of went down this false alley of like what they called stack packs, which was basically like a build pack that could modify the underlying stack itself. And that turned out to be just like a combinatoric explosion of complexity in the specification. And so they've since then gone back and are trying to address it with this concept of kind of like dynamic Docker files, where basically like you can have a Docker file that can be emitted during the build process that can then be executed at a later point during the build process. And this is a relatively simpler idea, but it has also cost the spec like quite a lot in terms of time, and then like put a pause on their ability to kind of really button up the remainder of the spec to get to a 1.0. So I don't know where it stands today, but like the major thing they're focused on at this point is this particular aspect of the specification related to like modifying the stacks. As soon as that's done, I would imagine you would see the core working group around CNB pivot back to a real hard conversation about what does a 1.0 for the specification look like, because that's kind of where they were at before they pivoted into this whole stack modification concern.
Yeah, there's been some discussions too about simplifying things that I suspect they're going to want to tackle before there's a 1.0 release. Like they've talked about removing the concept of a stack as a whole, and what were those called? I can't think of the name, but there was like some metadata descriptor information that was being appended to the stacks and things like that. They're trying to push out some stuff that is currently in the life cycle into what they're calling like utility build packs. That would provide things for like, dot profile support in a consistent way, but that's not necessarily in the life cycle itself. So there's definitely seems to be a desire to try to simplify and clean up some stuff too before that might happen. Cool. Any other questions?
I have my other topic related to you all.
Yep. Go ahead.
Which is somewhat controversial. Paketo, are you looking for new homes? Or do you is there other locations that make sense for Paketo to be in the Kubernetes Foundation ecosystem? Or how is it going being part of the Cloud Foundry Foundation? It's something we talked about when we were forming working groups and such. So it's not a secret that there might be a new home for it someday. Do you have ideas about where you'd like to be and or problems you're experiencing because you're part of the Cloud Foundry Foundation? Or how is that membership situation going?
I think it's been something that I've heard mentioned, but I've never heard a serious discussion come up about it. I don't know, Ryan has been on the steering committee longer than I, so he might have more insight.
I I would say I don't think that there's any direct evidence that there's like a negative concern with us being in the Cloud Foundry Foundation. I think we are something of an odd duck in the collection of working groups that you do all oversee. But we haven't had an instance where someone's been like, I'd love to use Paketo, or I'd love to like, contribute, but like the CFF is not, I can't do that. That's not been an instance that I've seen. I think like our biggest concern is maybe there are folks out there who do feel that way, who just aren't communicating that to us. And so that results in us just seeing like on net fewer contributors than we would otherwise. I have not done anything actively to like seek out other kind of like foundational ownership concerns, but yeah.
I would say like anecdotally, like the build pack spec is part of the CNCF, and kind of participating in that as well. I feel like I see a lot more traffic there. I don't know, necessarily why that is, but when you're in their Slack, they're part of the CNCF Slack, and you just get people that pop in and they're like, hey, I'm so-and-so, I want to help with something. And so there is always that thought in the back of my mind, like, hey, maybe some other place is just more trafficked and could potentially have more visibility for us. But I don't think we've like got a way to measure that or say for sure that would happen.
Is CNCF a likely potential future owner if you switch? Like, is that where it makes the most sense to be outside of Cloud Foundry Foundation? Or where are possible opportunities to switch?
I mean, that is a very like hot community right now. There's a lot going on there, and so it brings a lot of eyeballs. So I think it would certainly be in the list of things to discuss, but I don't know, seriously if that makes sense or what else to evaluate at this point.
I also think that like if our long-term goal is for Paketo to be kind of like the collaborative space for build packs, for like actual implementations of build packs fulfilling the CNB specification, then it makes a lot of sense for us to actually be aligned with the CNB specification and kind of where we're housed. And so I do recognize or see somewhat frequently this like acknowledgement that like the CNB spec exists, but they themselves don't have any build packs, and then like confusion about, well, where are the build packs if you don't have any? And so like being more closely associated with CNB and therefore like probably in the CNCF, I think might help in that kind of like discovery process, and then maybe just kind of like in our longer term growth.
Thanks.
Sure. Any other questions?
I guess one thing I've been curious about, speaking about kind of community alignment and participation, is whether there's been interest from the primary maintainers or contributors to these language families or framework families themselves to contributing to the Paketo build packs or to other build pack families that might be out there in the ecosystem. Because it seems like that could go a long way to designating like that build pack line as something more of the official build pack for that language or that framework.
I think when you start to talk about a official build pack, it gets touchy, because there are other members in the build packs project that have their own build packs as well. And so, we're all part of the like suggested set of builders that you could use, but I think there's definitely an emphasis on not being on that being like a neutral kind of stance, and so that's kind of a touchy subject, I feel.
The major groups of build packs that exist for like the most common languages that you see really commonly, they're the ones that are like the pack CLI has a set of suggested builders, which is just like anyone who's said basically, I have built packs, I'd like for people to be able to discover them for the most part. The primary two groups that I see there are Heroku, which again, the like kind of originator of the build packs concept. It makes sense that they would have their own build packs, and then Google on the other side. In both cases, they're doing what Paketo is doing, but then also in addition to that, they have some very platform specific integrations that enable the use cases that they care about for Heroku and then for Google Cloud on the other side. I think a good long-term goal for us would be to try to be able to collaborate with both of those groups in such a way that we could say, Paketo handles all of the common bits underneath those things, and then you can have these kind of like platform extension points, or you can build on top of them in order to get that kind of like more deeply integrated build pack experience, if that's something that you want. We haven't really gotten there yet. I think we're still in a phase where we're like just trying to lay out the foundations of quite a lot of things and prove out to be like successful. And so I think that's like a longer term goal, but I could imagine a future where that were the case. That being said, if we could get to such a thing where like build packs were proven to be successful, we were kind of like, you know, the main location where build packs existed and there was like a community around it, I do think it would make sense for us to start to think about engaging folks like, you know, the upstream language maintainers for different language ecosystems to see if we could get things like, you know, they already today provide like canonical Docker images for their language ecosystems. Like it would make sense for us to say, like, can we get, you know, sign off to say this is like the official Python build pack that's kind of supported by the Python community, so on and so forth.
Cool. Any other questions? So we had two more kind of pre-show questions that were posed to us. That one of them was, you know, is our working group taking on new contributors or contributors leaving? And I think you know, for the build packs that I'm working on in the Java space, we're actually seeing a pretty good uptick in contributions right now. You know, we've had a number of build packs contributed, and you know, even right now we're kind of merging in some new expansions and things, so it's growing quite a bit. Probably the pattern I would say that we're seeing though is that we'll get contributions that maybe scratch someone's particular itch, and then once that's done, then they kind of take off. We're not really seeing a lot of growth in kind of you know, long-term contributors or contributors that are interested in like helping with like, you know, ongoing project maintenance and you know, that type of work. So it's you know, when it comes to new features, that's kind of where we're seeing the contributors right now.
I think we have a similar experience on all of the other build packs. I think the one thing that kind of stands out to me as work to be done by the core Paketo project in order to like enable this is the on-ramp to being able to contribute to a build pack in a significant way is steep. And so we need to do a better job of like improving documentation, lowering the kind of barriers to entry in order to do things like pull down the code base and run the test suites and like understand the specification and really kind of grok what's going on in the code bases. We need to do a better job of a lot of build packs tend to follow these kind of like patterns of this is this kind of build pack or this type of build pack. We need to do a better job of like telling or showing developers how they can like build those kinds of things and what the kind of expectations are for them. I think if we do those things, I think it would be much more likely that we would start to see that type of contribution. I'm definitely encouraged to see more engagement in like issues, comments on pull requests and stuff that shows up in our RFC repository. conversation in our discussions repositories. And then, just a big improvement in the engagement we're seeing in our Slack instance. We're seeing like more people showing up there, asking questions, trying to get information about how to use build packs or suggesting features. So that's considerably improved from like, wow, it's been almost 2 years since Paketo launched. So like, it's, I think we're seeing the initial, like what will eventually be kind of like a contributor cohort as users to begin with. And like that already is seeming to be successful. So yeah, I think we can knock down the kind of like barriers to entry, then I think we'll start to see more folks contributing to the community.
Yeah, that's been something that we've, in the initial response we've gotten on our 2022 roadmap has been a theme that we're seeing, as people want to be able to have an easier onboarding path. Cool. So the last kind of question that we had was, do you need any support from the TOC or the governing board? I think the primary thing I had flagged to raise here, we already talked about, and that was kind of, what is the interest or direction in terms of Paketo and Cloud Foundry usage together. So I think we've kind of covered my point. I don't know, Ryan, did you have anything on this one that you wanted to highlight?
Nothing specific. I think that, I don't know, the things that I've always thought of as like concerns with Cloud Foundry, I think we've covered both of them, which were how do we integrate back into Cloud Foundry if that's something that we want to do and make happen, and then where do we fit organizationally? I think we've covered both of those topics.
Yeah, so I think that that covered everything, unless there's any additional follow-up questions. Awesome. Well, it's been great. I hope we did a good job for the first time, and reach out if you have any more follow-up.
Thanks so much. Great.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. So that rounds us off nicely to any other business. I see, Ram, you've dropped something in.
Yeah, just a reminder about the CAB call for this month. So that's happening tomorrow. Interestingly, someone came forward in the very quiet service broker API Slack and wanted to bring some stuff up for discussion. And I took the liberty of inviting Ono, who I think is a past presenter at like various CF summits and things like that. So he's agreed to share some experiences that he and his team have had with recent quote unquote successes with the service broker API. Apparently they're using it with like Cloud Foundry and Kubernetes, and like all good technology, Ono has also been having some challenges in terms of getting some stuff updated on the Kubernetes side and things like that. So yeah, we're going to be airing all of that information, the good, the bad, the ugly, all of it tomorrow. So if folks are able to join, please do hop into the call.
Thank you very much. And Giuseppe.
Yes, I wanted to bring up the new contributors process because my working group is in the process of having a new person joining. And I think this might be the first time that we do it the new way instead of the old way. And I realized that we might not have anything in place actually to get new people on board. So I think previously what happened is if someone joined a team via one of the sponsor companies, that just be added to all the repositories, all the organizations, and then they would have full powers from day one. Nowadays, we don't do that anymore. And there is, I see there is a process that kind of mandates a progression from member to contributor to approver, I think. But we don't have anything in place to actually make sure that people go through these steps, and no one checking when they're ready to step through. And it's very easy for someone to just, I don't even know how, but like send a ticket to someone and get just full access to everything, and boom. So I just wanted to ask if like how we should approach this. I've spent some time on GitHub just trying to understand their permission model and how we could like implement this, like in terms of like actual permissions. And my understanding is that if you're added to an organization, you can't do much yet, although you can create, like there is some settings there. I don't know how the CF org is set, but like you could potentially create repositories and boards and things, but that can be turned off. And then you need to be added to a repository. And then at that point you get a role, which there's like a read role, a write role, a triage role, etc. And then, or you can be added to a team that has a role, and then you inherit the role of the team. So I was wondering how we should do this, because I think just by looking at it, my impression is that we could add contributors, which are people who have made some contributions. That's what the document says at the moment. Like it's not very specific, just add them to the org and maybe give them read permissions on the repositories that they are interested in, like for the working group they belong to. And that would at least give them
open.
like,
this should be open source, right? So you shouldn't be needing to manage the read permissions. I think the first critical security question you have to answer is there a role for people who can make branches on the repository and PR them in? Is the definition of a contributor in your area someone who can make branches but can't merge them?
No, I think the definition is people who can approve PRs. Oh, sorry,
no, that's an
people
approver.
who can review PRs, not approve them, but review them. And you need extra permissions to do that. To make PRs, I think we just accept them from personal folks. So we just make a form, yeah. So they don't need to create branches on our own repositories. But like to become an approver, you need to do a bunch of reviews. And I think the problem with this person I'm talking about is that they couldn't do reviews until they were added. But then when they were added to the team and suddenly became like, suddenly they got all the permissions. We want something in between, and we want it to be structured so that when you join, you get added to that thing in between, like either separate teams. There's also a way to create like custom roles. There is all sorts of ways. I'm not sure I'm able to get into like the details of how we should do it, but how do we get this started is my question. Like I can spend some extra time and get together some sort of change request, and then we can discuss it there in the pull request, or I don't know. Like, because also the role of who assigns these permissions, like should the leads have the powers to do this and the leads only, or should the leads be able to just open tickets to someone who makes sure that the request is coming from someone legit? I don't know, but I think we should do something, because at the moment we have nothing in place from a technical point of view. Like we have a document that says this should be done this way, but that's it.
Yeah,
there is an
I
RFC.
think there's an RFC. This is somewhat narrowly scoped to adding people to the Cloud Foundry GitHub org. But I think that seems like about the general level. Maybe there's an unaddressed question here about how would we grant them that additional privilege of being in the obvious pool of review candidates, or having that level of access, where they come up as this person is a good person to solicit a review from, even if they're not an approver.
Yeah, because we could technically add anyone who signs the CLA to the org, and they would still have probably very little power to do anything, because like you still need to be added to the repositories individually, although we don't need to. one thing we could do is once they are a contributor, so once they've done a sensible contribution, whatever that is, then we add them to the org at that point. And with that, we also add them, give them read permissions. So ability to review without ability to merge, without ability to do any changes to the code for the repositories that belong to the working group. And we could do that either with, like, I guess, specially created teams. So we could have a contributors team for every working group and a approvers team, for example. Well, my working group now only has one.
Yeah, I think you're going to have a team for leads. We're probably going to have a team for approvers in different areas. There's nothing wrong with the contributors team in GitHub, and then it gets so much easier because you know who the people are. Then you got to figure out which permissions to give them on different repositories. You don't need to be like, presumably I can tag anyone on an open source repository that everyone can read. Can I tag anyone as a reviewer? Can I request a review?
Apparently not. From what I see, you need to have at least read permissions on the repository to be able to file reviews.
But it's open source. You're saying
you can create the PR without anyone's permission, but I think to review, you need to have some permissions. That's my understanding. I can look it up further.
I mean, isn't it about like being involved in the discussion on a review? Right, I think it's about that, like assigning someone as a reviewer. For that you should be an approver, right? Because that person can like make sure that it actually gets merged.
But so here's the thing: you can make a review, or you can approve a change, and those two are different things. And GitHub is even clever because if you have some auto merging thing in place, it will not allow you to approve a change if that change would lead to the thing being merged if you don't have permissions to merge, right? So basically, reviewing is a thing, but then approving a thing so that it can get in is a separate permission in GitHub. So you can give people permission to review without them ever being able to approve the change and get it in. And I think that's what we want for contributors who are not approvers. But I don't think anyone should be able to review. I think, or at least I don't think anyone is able to review with the way GitHub permissions work. That's my understanding. Because it's very hairy. Like there is all sorts of like levels of granularity at which you can apply these things. But I think if you look at there's a table somewhere, like with the classic ticks, and I think reviewing is not something that anyone can do. But yeah, I can either extend, like make a new RFC for what's missing from the one you pointed out, or I don't know, we can think of extending this, I don't know. Okay, I guess I'll put something together for a new one maybe, just so that, because this has already been accepted, so definitely a new one. And we can discuss there, see.
Yeah, that seems the ideal way to do things.
Okay, we'll do that. This probably also plugs into the whole automating the creation of repositories and stuff, because we could automate the creation of the teams. Okay.
Okay. Has anyone got anything else for this week? No. Okay, one final thing. I'm going to be on holiday for the next 2 weeks. So enjoy. All right. Thank you very much, everyone, for this week. It's been wonderful as always. And have a great one.
Thanks, everyone.
See you.
Thank you.